It's none other than Gray Sexton. And Mr. Sexton, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
The trip that was offered to some of our city council members was a trip to Orlando, a 3-day trip, all expenses paid, to view the headquarters of the United Soccer League, which is an entity that is trying to be involved in a deal for some city property that would be donated for use for a soccer stadium here in our community. I guess go over generally what the law allows and does not allow.
Well, I can tell you that in general, public officials cannot accept anything of economic value for services that are reasonably related to the performance of their governmental duties and responsibilities, other than food and drink while consumed as the personal guest of some person, and promotional items having no resale value, such as T-shirts and baseball caps with some logo on it.
Mr. Gray, would it be reasonable to say that in your experience, that the term reasonable is a rather large and gray area?
It is, but there are a handful of advisory opinions and adjudications of the Ethics Board which has fleshed out those terms, and they clearly, at least in the position of the Ethics Board, includes travel and lodging. Travel and lodging have been determined by the Ethics Board to be a, quote, thing of economic value, end quote, and therefore generally proscribed from being received by governmental officials if it is given to them for services reasonably related to their governmental duties and responsibilities. There is a narrow exception in an earlier board opinion in which the board concluded that if in an RFP, a request for proposal, the governmental agency specifically requires that all of the applicants provide funding for a site visit by the governmental officials to some facility to measure the quality of an operation that is the subject of the RFQ, that under those narrow circumstances, it is not a thing of economic value for those governmental officials to receive the transportation and lodging that is required in the RFP. But with that narrow exception, I would have to say that the Ethics Board has been consistent in their determination that travel and lodging by governmental officials to view or evaluate facilities in connection with governmental transactions is a proscribed thing of economic value.
Gray, let me ask you, sorry, Mr. Sexton, is it illegal to offer the trip?
The statute in question talks about receipt, but there are opinions of the board that suggest that the offering is the flip side of the receipt, and that therefore both the governmental official and the provider of the thing of economic value is proscribed under the Ethics Code from the particular transaction. An offer that is not accepted and that does not ripen into a transaction would unlikely, in my opinion, be categorized as a prohibited gift.
When does it rise to the level of this is a crime and you can be prosecuted?
There is an obscure provision in the Ethics Code that seems to provide district's attorneys with some jurisdiction over violations of the Ethics Code. But in general, violations of the Ethics Code are considered as civil violations and not criminal violations, and district's attorneys do not have jurisdiction to enforce the provisions of the Ethics Code. The Ethics Board can bring charges, and those charges are then civil proceedings that are heard by yet another state agency called the Ethics Adjudicatory Board.
So you would face a fine. If I were a city council member and I took this trip to Orlando, I could possibly be hauled before the Ethics Board and maybe face a fine? Would that be kind of the extent of it?
That is correct.
And how about
if a complaint is filed with the Ethics Board and the Ethics Board conducts an investigation and concludes that there is reason to believe that a violation has occurred, it can file charges. Those charges are then heard by a 3-member administrative agency known as the Ethics Adjudicatory Board. That board then has the power and authority to administer civil fines against those who have been determined to violate the provisions of the Ethics Code.
And what about the folks who made the offer, whatever that offer may be?
That is correct. There's a flip side that provides in Section 1117 that if you give a prohibited gift, then that giver is likewise subject to the imposition of a penalty. I believe there's a maximum civil penalty of $10,000 for the giving of a prohibited gift.
But basically, it's like so many things in life, nothing happens until someone says yes.
That is correct. There's a fairly elaborate process that is designed to ensure equal protection and full faith and credit of the applicable laws, and that process unwinds in a series of statutorily mandated phases, all of which are controlled by Title 42 of the Louisiana Revised Statutes.